The sun hammered down on Elmwood Park's public courts. The asphalt cracked like old skin, chain-link fences clanking in the wind, white lines bleached to ghosts. But none of that registered because Lila had texted me that morning asking for tennis lessons, and I'd replied yes before my brain caught up. She showed up in a lavender tank top already damp from the humidity, ponytail flicking like a metronome as she bounced on her toes waiting for the first ball. I remember her grip was all wrong. Thumb wrapped too high, knuckles white. So I stepped behind her, adjusted the racket, my fingers sliding over the soft inside of her wrist where her pulse kicked hard. She smelled like coconut sunscreen and hot metal. When I told her to drop her shoulders, she laughed a low, throaty sound. Then, without warning, sank into a perfect split, right on the baseline, skirt fluttering up to reveal the edge of her black shorts. I stood frozen with the ball basket balanced on my hip, heart slamming louder than the traffic on the boulevard. She looked up at me from the ground, eyes sparkling, and said, "I'm more flexible than I look." The words landing like a serve I had no return for. I laughed too loud to cover the heat crawling up my neck. Muttered something about flexibility not helping if you can't track the ball. But my voice cracked on the last syllable and she noticed. Of course she did, because Lila noticed everything. The squeak of my left shoe when I pivoted, the way I kept glancing at the water fountain like it might save me. She rose in one fluid motion, brushing clay grit from her thighs, and asked if I could show her the follow-through again, slower this time. So I did, standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her skin, guiding her arm in a lazy arc, the racket slicing empty air. And when our eyes met in the reflection of her sunglasses, I saw my own face flushed and unguarded. She tilted her head and asked if I always taught with my hands or just for the pretty students. I stammered something about muscle memory, but she was already smiling like she'd won the point. Then she took the racket from me and mimicked the motion perfectly, her body twisting in a way that made the air feel thinner. I fed her another ball and she cracked it cross-court, the clean pop echoing off the empty bleachers. "Good," I said, "but keep your eyes on the ball longer." She rolled them playfully and said, "Maybe I just like watching you watch me." And there it was, the line crossed without a sound, the lesson tilting into something else entirely. We kept going through the drills, forehands, backhands, volleys at the net where our rackets clacked and our breaths mingled, sweat beading at her hairline, sliding down the side of her neck. And every time she stretched for a wide ball, her shirt rode up just enough to show the dimples above her waistband. I tried to focus on footwork, on strategy, on anything but the way her lips parted when she exhaled after a long rally. But the court was shrinking around us, the fences leaning in, the sky pressing down. And when she finally called for a water break, she didn't walk to the bench. She walked straight to me, took the bottle from my hand, and drank with her eyes locked on mine, a droplet escaping to trace the curve of her chin. She wiped it with the back of her wrist and said, "Your turn to show me something impressive." "Coach," I laughed nervously and suggested we work on serves, but she was already tossing the ball up, her body arching back, legs spread for balance, the racket whipping through in a motion so smooth it looked choreographed. The ball rocketed over the net and clipped the line. "Love 15," she called out with a grin, and I realized the game had changed without either of us saying the score. We played out the set with trash talk and laughter, her calling my shots grandpa style, me telling her she telegraphed every drop shot. But underneath the banter was a current pulling us closer. Every shared glance a point scored, every brush of shoulders a fault called in our favor. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, our shirts were soaked and our voices hoarse. She suggested one more game to decide who bought smoothies. Winner's choice of flavor, I agreed too quickly. And we rallied longer than we should have, the ball blurring back and forth until she lunged for a low slice and tumbled onto the court, laughing as she rolled onto her back. I dropped my racket and knelt beside her, asking if she was okay. But she just reached up and tugged my sleeve until I was lying next to her. The clay warm beneath us, the sky turning lavender like her shirt. She turned her face to me and whispered, "I told you I was flexible," then lifted her leg straight up until her foot pointed at the first star. I couldn't help it. I laughed, and she laughed harder, the sound vibrating through both our chests. And in that moment, the lesson was over and something new was beginning, something that tasted like salt and coconut and possibility. We lay there until the automatic lights flickered on, bathing the court in pale fluorescence. And when we finally sat up, she brushed clay from my elbow with careful fingers, her touch lingering. Then she stood and offered me her hand. I took it, and as she pulled me up, our bodies aligned for a second longer than necessary. Her hip against mine, her breath warm on my neck. She said same time tomorrow, but bring better moves, coach, and walked off with her racket swinging at her side, ponytail bouncing, leaving me standing in the glow of the court lights with the echo of her laugh and the imprint of her hand in mine. I watched her disappear through the gate and knew the next lesson would have nothing to do with tennis. I showed up early the next afternoon with 2 iced coffees and a plan to keep things professional, but the courts were empty except for a janitor sweeping leaves near the fence. And when Lila arrived, she was wearing black leggings that left nothing to imagination and a cropped hoodie unzipped just enough to reveal the curve of her sports bra. She took the coffee with a thank you that sounded like a secret, then set her bag down and stretched against the net post, one leg extended high, toes pointed. I busied myself stringing a spare racket to avoid staring, but she caught me anyway and said, "Eyes up here, coach," though her smile said she didn't mind. We started with footwork drills, ladder steps, and side shuffles, me calling out patterns while she moved like water. Light and quick, sweat already gathering at her collarbone. I corrected her stance, hands on her hips to square them, and she leaned back into me just enough to make my pulse stutter. "Sorry," she murmured, but didn't move away. Instead, she asked if I could feel the difference when she engaged her core. And I could, God I could, the heat of her skin through the thin fabric, the way her muscles shifted under my palms. I stepped back too fast and nearly tripped over the ladder. She laughed and said, "Careful. Don't want you pulling anything." Then suggested we try reaction drills at the net. Quick volleys to sharpen reflexes. We took positions and I fed her soft shots, our rackets tapping in rapid fire, the ball barely clearing the net, her eyes never leaving mine, every block and punch accompanied by a playful taunt. "Too slow, old man. Can't keep up," and I fired back that she was swinging wild. But the truth was I was distracted by the way her hoodie slipped off one shoulder, the strap of her bra a thin black line against her skin. We kept going until our forearms burned and the ball sailed long. Rolling to the fence, she jogged after it, bending at the waist, and I looked away too late. She straightened with the ball in hand and a knowing smirk, then proposed a new drill, one she'd seen online. Partner resistance, where one player pushes while the other holds position. Sounded innocent enough until she placed my hands on her shoulders and told me to push while she resisted, her body solid and warm, muscles flexing under my grip. Then she switched and pressed her palms against my chest, pushing me back step by step across the court. Her strength surprising, her eyes locked on mine. And when my heels hit the baseline, she didn't stop, just kept leaning until I had to brace or fall. I braced, and for a moment we were chest to chest, her breath fanning my neck. Then she eased off with a grin and said, "Good. You've got power, now let's see control." We moved to serving practice, me demonstrating toss and snap, her copying with exaggerated flair, tossing the ball high and kicking one leg back like a dancer. The ball rocketing over but landing wide, she shrugged and said close enough, then asked me to stand behind her to check her toss height. I hesitated but did it, my chest to her back, arm raised alongside hers, and when she released the ball, her elbow grazed my ribs, sending a jolt through me. She served 3 in a row like that, each one better, each graze more deliberate, until the fourth when she spun around mid-motion and the ball bounced forgotten between us. She was close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, the faint freckles across her nose. She said, "Your heart's racing." "Coach, feel mine," and took my hand, pressing it flat between her breasts, the thud steady and strong. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Just stood there feeling her life under my palm while the world narrowed to that point of contact. Then she stepped back and picked up her racket like nothing happened. Suggested we play a tiebreaker, 1st to 7. Loser does push-ups. We played hard, grunting with every swing, diving for shots that should have been impossible. The score climbing 5-all, 6-all, then match point. She served a bullet that I barely returned, the rally stretching until she hit a drop shot that died at the net. I lunged and missed, sprawling on the clay. She whooped and stood over me, hands on hips, demanding her push-ups. I rolled onto my back and started them 1, 2, 3. She counted along, Then on 10 dropped to her knees and pushed my shoulders down, pinning me, her hair falling around us like a curtain. She said, "Payment accepted," then leaned down and kissed me quick and sure, lips soft and tasting of coffee. Before I could react, she was up and packing her bag, slinging it over her shoulder. "Tomorrow we work on endurance, bring water and stamina," and left me lying on the court with clay in my hair and the ghost of her mouth on mine. The automatic lights buzzing overhead, the night air cooling the sweat on my skin. I stayed there a long time, replaying every second. Knowing the next lesson would break every rule I thought I had, 1,500 characters. The third day brought rain clouds and a canceled City League match, so the courts were ours alone, the air thick with ozone and anticipation. Lila arrived in a rain jacket the color of storm clouds. Hood up, cheeks flushed from the sprint through drizzle. She shook it off like a dog and revealed a white tank now translucent from the wet. I pretended not to notice and suggested indoor drills in the community center, but she had other ideas, pulled a yoga mat from her bag and said, "Flexibility training. Coach, you promised to stretch me out." The double meaning hung between us like the humidity. I followed her to the covered picnic area where the concrete was dry. She unrolled the mat and started with sun salutations, her body folding and unfolding in slow motion. I stood awkwardly until she beckoned me down beside her. Said partner's mirror for better form, so I copied her, downward dog, plank, cobra, our breath sinking, her voice soft as she corrected my alignment, hand on my lower back to press deeper, fingers splayed, then on my thigh to open my hips. Each touch clinical only on the surface. Underneath a current that made my skin burn, we moved through warrior poses. Her leg extended high, mine shaking to match. She laughed and said, "Steady, imagine the ball coming at you. Use the core." Then dropped into a straddle split that made my jaw drop. She reached forward, chest nearly to the ground, and looked back at me upside down. "See? Told you." I muttered something about show-offs and tried the split. Collapsing halfway, she crawled over and placed her hands on my knees, gently pressing them apart, her face inches from mine. "Breathe," she said, and I did. Inhaling her scent of rain and vanilla, exhaling shakily, she held the stretch until my muscles screamed, then eased me up with a hand under my elbow. Good progress, now reward. She produced 2 protein bars from her bag. We ate leaning against the picnic table, legs dangling, talking about everything and nothing. Her telling me about growing up doing gymnastics until a knee injury sidelined her. Me admitting I played varsity in college but quit after a shoulder tear. The shared history of bodies pushed to limits bonding us in a way tennis never could. Rain pattered on the tin roof. A steady rhythm. And when she brushed crumbs from my knee, her hand stayed there, thumb tracing small circles. I covered it with mine, and she turned her palm up, lacing our fingers. The moment stretched until thunder rolled, and she stood. Pulling me with her, said, "Let's dance in it." Before I could protest, she was out in the drizzle. Arms wide, spinning, I followed because what else could I do? The rain cool on my skin, soaking us instantly. She grabbed my hands and we moved in clumsy circles. Laughing like kids, then she stopped and pressed against me, wet shirt to wet shirt, and kissed me slow this time. No quick peck, but a real kiss, her tongue teasing mine. Hands sliding up my back under my shirt, nails dragging lightly. I kissed her back with everything I'd been holding in, lifting her onto the picnic table, her legs wrapping around my waist, the rain drumming harder, masking the sounds we made. Gasps and sighs and her whispering my name like a serve she wanted me to return. We broke apart only when lightning flashed too close, breathless and dripping. She hopped down and said we should head inside before we get struck. But her eyes said the storm was just starting. We gathered our things and jogged to the community center, empty except for the hum of vending machines. She found an unused racquetball court and pulled me in. Closing the door behind us, the echo of rain muffled. She dropped her bag and pushed me against the wall, kissing me again, deeper, her hands under my shirt mapping every muscle. I tugged her tank up and off, revealing the smooth plane of her stomach. The black bra dark against her skin. She arched into my touch as I traced the line of her spine, then spun me so my back was to the wall and sank to her knees, looking up with a wicked grin before tugging my shorts down. The cool air a shock, then her mouth warm and sure. I threaded fingers through her wet hair, hips moving on instinct, the slap of rain on the roof matching the rhythm she set. When I got close, she stood and kissed me, so I tasted myself on her tongue. Then turned and braced her hands on the wall, looking back over her shoulder. "Your turn, coach. Teach me something new." I didn't need to be told twice, sliding her leggings down, palming the curve of her ass, then entering her slow, both of us groaning at the fit, the angle perfect. Her flexibility letting her bend in ways that made my vision blur. We moved together, hard and fast, the court echoing with our sounds. Her pushing back to meet every thrust, one hand reaching back to grip my thigh. When she came, she bit her lip to muffle the cry, the pulse around me pulling me over the edge. We stayed locked together, panting, rain easing outside. Then she turned in my arms and kissed me soft. Saying best lesson yet, we cleaned up with towels from her bag, giggling like teenagers. And when we stepped out, the clouds were parting. Sunlight breaking through, she took my hand and we walked to our cars, promising nothing and everything with a look. The court's waiting for tomorrow, but no longer the center of the game. Word must have spread, or maybe we were careless, but by the fourth afternoon, a couple kids showed up wanting pointers, so we played the parts of coach and student, keeping distance, demonstrating strokes while trading coded glances. Lila in neon pink today, the color loud against the clay. She aced every drill to show off, winking when the kids weren't looking. I kept my voice steady, explaining grip pressure, but my mind was on the way her shorts rode up when she served, the flex of her calves. After the kids left, she locked the gate behind them and said, "Finally," then pulled me into the equipment shed, the air thick with the smell of resin and rubber. She pushed me onto a stack of practice nets, straddling my lap, kissing me hungry. Hands already under my shirt, I yanked her top off and buried my face in her neck, tasting salt and sun. She ground against me, whispering how she'd been wet since the first serve. I flipped her onto the mats, peeling her shorts down, spreading her thighs to taste her. Slow licks that made her hips buck, her hands fisting in my hair, guiding me where she wanted. When she came, she pulled me up to kiss her through it, then reached for my waistband, stroking me hard and fast until I begged. She laughed and guided me inside her, riding me with rolling hips, the shed creaking around us, dust motes dancing in the light through the slats. We switched positions twice, her on her knees, me behind, then against the wall, her leg hooked over my arm, using every inch of her flexibility, sweat slicking our skin. When we finished, we collapsed in a heap, laughing breathlessly. She traced patterns on my chest and said we should probably actually play tennis sometime. I kissed her forehead and said, "Next lesson. Promise." But we both knew the promise was flexible. We emerged rumpled but grinning, packing up as the sun set, and when she drove off with a wave, I stood in the empty lot feeling the ache in muscles I didn't know I had, the shed door swinging slightly in the breeze. Tomorrow loomed with possibility, and the faint worry that someone would notice the extra time we spent after hours. But the worry felt distant compared to the thrum of her name in my blood. The fifth day was the last before the courts closed for resurfacing. A deadline we didn't acknowledge but both felt. Lila arrived with a picnic blanket and a bottle of Prosecco, saying if we couldn't play, we could at least celebrate the week. We spread the blanket under the lone oak by the fence. The court lights off for once, stars pricking the sky. She poured the bubbly into plastic cups and we toasted to flexibility, clinking with a laugh, then talked for hours, legs tangled. Her head on my shoulder, stories spilling out, her dream to open a studio, my secret wish to coach kids who couldn't afford lessons, the Prosecco loosening our words and our hands. When the bottle was empty, she kissed me slow and sweet, then not sweet at all, pulling me down onto the blanket, undressing each other under the moonlight, her skin silver and warm. We moved unhurried, exploring every inch, her flexibility letting us twist into positions that felt like art. Whispering filthy and tender things, when we came it was together, quiet cries swallowed by the night. Afterward, she curled against me, tracing the line of my jaw, and said the courts might close, but this doesn't have to. I kissed her palm and said, then let's find new courts. New games, she smiled, sleepy and certain, and we lay there until dew soaked the blanket, packing up only when the sprinklers hissed to life. She kissed me one last time, long and promising, then walked to her car, ponytail swinging. I watched her taillights disappear and knew the lesson had just begun. The title of our story, no longer about tennis, but about everything that came after she said, "I'm more flexible than I look."